Pleasure to, yes, so my name is Jason Pipe, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you how to improve proficiency in fluency and pronunciation in a Japanese context. This is research done by myself and Professor Teraki Tsushima at Tokyo Keizai University. Now, the reason for this research is because we deal with first year university students in particular who have trouble trying to maintain conversations, okay? So, for example, at the beginning of the year, I might get students saying, help, English is difficult, we have difficult homework, or they might say, listening is too difficult, or they don't like tests, or the textbook is easy for us, or they're just silent. So we had to think about how we're going to deal with students to improve their fluency, let alone their pronunciation. Now, there's a whole range of reasons why, but the most important thing is you need to change their attitude. Now, this is cultural, for example. So students feel very, they lack confidence in speaking, partly because of concerns and misunderstandings about what expectations are made by the teacher and other students. There's also an issue about the harmonious relationship between the other people in the group. Some students may feel uncomfortable or lose face by making mistakes, while others may feel uncomfortable because they're speaking out. So as a result, it becomes rather a quiet atmosphere when it comes to speech production. But also there's the experience from high school. I'm not sure what it's like in Korea, but fluency issues can occur because teaching is rather passive, focusing on the reading skills and grammar skills. There's also concern about accuracy, avoiding mistakes, so students feel reluctant to speak as a result of that. Then there's a memorization of tests as well, trying to remember so long lists of vocabulary that's struggling. And then the teachers themselves have not had an adequate enough experience and training to work on communicational skills. But then even the native teachers aren't always suitable because they're not aware of student needs. And what we found that's and the final problem being entrance examinations. But what we found that non-native speakers focus on reading context or analyzing grammar, whereas the natives might try to have fun classes at high school. But the issue is neither approach actually works because they're not actually producing language to maintain conversation. So what do we use to help these students and the teacher in the class? Well, come to first year university, students are given textbooks. Now, teachers love to use textbooks because they are useful to a certain degree because it enables management of teaching, it's convenient, it assists in syllabus design, and it meets generally the requirements and needs and also cultural characteristics that students require. But are the tasks meaningful? Do students think independently? And what about speech production after all? Our research is looking at fluency and also pronunciation. Well, we found that if you focus on teaching away from teacher-centered classes, at the university it's sort of moved on to textbook-centered classes, when in actual fact we want to move on to students communicating among themselves in English only. And so this is what we're trying to focus on so we can improve their fluency. Now, the main point is you want to get students conversing independently. To do so, they need to change their ideas of what English is about. It's not about analyzing, for example, a car engine. It's about learning to drive it. And that's what we use for getting students to talk more fluently. But we need something actually to work with that will help them on their road to improving their communication. So we looked at the nuts and bolts of how to talk in English, and we needed to focus on how to reorientate students from their high school experience, from their effects of their culture, to try to get them to become more proactive in their speech production. So this is where we introduced this idea of timed pair practice procedure. What it means is basically after finishing a unit, a textbook or a topic chosen, the students write down 10 to 20 questions on the topic. Now, this is actually really important because it gets the students to move away from generic topics from the textbook to ones which have more interest for them. So therefore, there's more relevancy in what they're trying to do. And then they ask these 10 questions to one pair, and then to another pair, keep practicing, then another pair. And then finally, when there's sufficient practice, two students are picked randomly and they need to discuss the topic, and the other students will be observing while these students are timed to see how long they can speak for. So it seems kind of straightforward, yeah? So again, get them in pairs, pardon the bad joke. They're in groups of 4 here, but you put them in pairs, you speak that way once, they practice a second time, that way, and then cross over for a third time. And this happens in the whole class, that everybody's producing their own speech and getting plenty of practice. Once they had sufficient practice again, the teacher observes one pair, they choose it randomly, and the teacher will stop them if there's any pausing, grammatical incorrectness, or there's comprehension issues, and so on. And while this is happening, the other students are listening, observing, and developing strategies from the analysis of watching other people perform. And this helps them in the long run too. So the idea is, by working on time pair practice, students start to produce their own language, become better intelligibility and comprehensibility as a result. Students also are able to converse better, and this does improve their English proficiency, and it also works on motivation, listening, speaking, and confidence. However, this is not just these are just some of the benefits. There are other benefits as well we found over the year. There's a change in attitude as well. It develops greater social linguistic awareness. It reduces stresses because they're providing these conversations on a weekly basis, and they start to discover opportunities to improve through the practice rounds. They're free to experiment, and they stretch their linguistic resources as a result. And it changes the motivation from goal performance to something that's meaningful in the practice stages. So it changes their attitude. And finally, you find that they realize after the year that it's important to understand and improve rather than just to perform well. But also you can touch upon the metacognitive learning as well. I was a former high school teacher, and so I'm very much aware about how to motivate students on that side too. And through the testing stages, I can discover how to work on improving students' learning. Now, there's lower order skills such as remembering, understanding, and applying, but then when you move up, you can see it's more challenging because you start to analyze, evaluate, and create language too. So if we think about it, you're teaching something new, students remember it, they understand it by you providing exercises, and then it's application to their own work. But through time pair practice, you work on analyzing others by observing their speeches, evaluating, providing feedback from their performances, and also applying to conversation, future conversations too. So we're starting to work on not just lower order skills, but high order skills as well. It also gives us a chance for students to improve on developing their questions techniques, and these are student orientated, so it has more benefit in motivation as well. And finally, because of the testing, you can begin to understand the gaps in the fluency, the grammar, the vocabulary, the pronunciation, so that you can work on those aspects. But also because of testing, you can start to build up on students' confidence and meta learning as well. So these are just some aspects. But as I said, through the testing, you'll discover the gaps in what students require to improve their pronunciation, but at least they're talking. And then you can target aspects. And then importantly, it's really essential that you maintain that level throughout the year course, especially for pronunciation, because if you ever taught such a thing, you'll realize that students need more time to absorb the variety of pronunciation aspects, and they won't get that if it's just taught one time. So it needs to be maintained. But pronunciation is challenging to teach. I'm still learning myself, so I wouldn't say I'm an expert yet, but definitely growing in confidence myself. But I found to teach pronunciation, you don't have to worry about accents, they don't impede communication. It's best to focus on elements of speech that improve comprehensibility and intelligibility. And so we look at production of suprasegmental features, which I'll explain a little bit later. By doing so, it improves the perception of lexical stress, and therefore improves segmentation of speech and location of word boundaries. So you sound more natural with the chunking. So the key point is looking at suprasegmental features. What do I mean by that? Well, training in prosody, okay? So let me just give an example. Japanese is a more timed language. In other words, it's equally timed syllables. So if I wanted to say English is difficult for me to understand, they would say something on the lines of English is difficult for me to understand. And my apologies for my bad pronunciation, but it's more of an equally timed syllable, where by the end of the year, I want to be speaking more like this. English is difficult for me to understand. And you can see there's contractions and sounds and lengthening stress on other words. I'll explain that a little bit later on too. So hopefully you got an idea of the issues that Japanese students are facing in the classroom. But to deal with it, when I teach pronunciation, I work on this range, and usually in this order: vowel pronunciation, short and long lengths, word stress, sentence stress, chunking, tonic syllables, intonation pattern, and finally connected speech. And I will touch upon these briefly as well. So those who understand, I apologize. Those who don't, I hope it becomes education for you too. So with pronunciation, I look at micro measures, i.e. attention to word and sentence pronunciation first. I get to adapt the pronunciation from course books so it matches students' needs. I work on the skills such as word stress, drills on words, connected speech phrases and sentences, and I'll show you examples of those too. I also get students to analyze and practice words and sentences so it becomes more familiar because it's related to their own conversation, and importantly, getting them to understand the contrast and stress. This has always been the biggest challenge. And then eliciting techniques further by getting students to more aware of how they can apply it in their own conversations. And then getting students again to try again, incorrect themselves, become even more aware of what they're doing right and where they need to improve. I also generally focus on the questions initially too. The reason why is because questions they're familiar with, they use it so often, they're focused because they use very limited level of grammar compared to the answers they provide. You can practice the questions over and over again. It's easy to analyze, evaluate, and model. So if you look at the question, you can look at, for example, the vowel quality, the word stress, you can look at the intonation, and also how the words are connected together. And that's in the questions. You can even teach that from day one if you'd like. And then from that, you can apply it to other areas of speech as well. So if we look at vowel quality basically means, how you pronounce the vowels as such. Now, everyone probably knows about the IPA and how it's located generally in the mouth, and tips about how to pronounce it carefully with the tongue position, lip position, tense and lax. I tend to focus on this side with Japanese because they have an or sound, which is more of a lax sound, as you can see in the blue kind of fonts. But in English, we have a range of lax and tense sounds, which takes more time for students to understand how to use. And so from that, I need to get students to exercise their pronunciation of these longer vowels better. So for example, here, I would go I. So they need to learn how to lengthen that rather than stick to the same syllable pattern as in Japanese. Okay, and I give word sheets to practice more, I, mine, why, and so on, and get them to try to use it in sentences too. Okay, and then I give them charts to look at, and so I can correct them where needed. I give them practice sheets so they can start to understand what it means, and then from that, use it in their own conversation through the time pair practice, the practice side. So they start to write out their own examples from conversing with pairs, with their partners. And then I get them to discover where they're going right and where they're wrong. So they provide examples. Here's an example here. The left side is the topics they've chosen. And when they're speaking, they try to give out examples of it. And once I've done that, I get them to analyze where they're going right and where they're going wrong too. But it's basically getting them to try to use it and become aware of it. But it's more than just that as well. It's not just practicing. They need to basically appreciate where it's going right and wrong. So it's okay to test them on it, but it's also important to make sure that they become aware of where they're going right and wrong. So in this example, you can see, maybe not. Yeah, you can see
usually, yeah,
me correcting their sounds.
Two, and maybe I am.
As an example, but by showing it, they get a clearer picture. But it's also about evaluating. So I give them a student homework, and we have to put in capital letters where there's the long vowel sound, and then I look at it and I provide worksheets for them to analyze where they're right, where they're not right, what words weren't noticed, and so on. So I'm trying to create a high level order of thinking in how to pronounce the long vowel sounds, for example. And evaluate, a similar thing. I get to try to read passages and determine where the vowel sounds are. Okay, so that's just in the vowel quality. And then I work on word stress, which is kind of a similar process. Okay, word stress, so for example, if you look at this word, it says computer, there's 3 syllables. But we work on duration, computer. We look at intensity, loudness, computer, and pitch, computer. Okay, there's 3 parts of the stress, and Japanese seem to understand pitch, but it's not used in the same way. Duration, intensity is something they're not aware of. It always stays the same. So it's very challenging to try to get students to become more aware of those aspects. And so we look at the words. So for example, 2-syllable words with a stress at the beginning or at the end. So for example, teacher, assist, student, because, pupils, succeed. And I get them to try to produce sentences of that. So for example, teacher assists students because pupils want to succeed. So that's just one example. And again, they practice as best they can from the worksheet I provide them. And then again, I get them to apply it and discover where they're going right and where they're going wrong. Again, it's all about getting them to apply again. So this is an example of their work. And if you look in the yellow, you can see these are the ones they get wrong because the Japanese pronunciation of clustered consonants, for example. So it does take time for them to become aware. After I give them sentence stress. So for example, do you think students will be able to understand what this actually is? So I had to rush fast. So I had to teach them content and function words. So for example, this is important to understand the rhythm. So contents are the important words and the function words are the words which aren't so important, so they're not stressed as much, but they do have an important aspect in the sentence, okay? Contents, again, clear clarification what's going on. Function words set up what the next word's going to be, basically. That's important for research. So if I give an example here, for example, if I look here, I get students to get them to look at these kind of words, the content function words in our textbook, so they actually produce an answer with the correct speeching pattern. Okay, again, with the questions, I do the same. Get them to work on those aspects of words, says, sentence stress, and so on. It does take time, so they need to chip away, but with more production in the time period practice, you do see an improvement as such. Shadowing is another aspect I work on.
Questions on your summer. Did you have a pleasant summer vacation?
So I would get them to repeat it or answer the question for fluency, but Shadow works the best. So I have it in front of them as well. So if
did you have a pleasant summer vacation? How did you spend your time during the summer?
So I can get them to repeat it as well. But the important thing here is that all this work is based on what students want to produce themselves. And so that's why I actually set these questions for homework and then use their work to produce the materials. And I use it for phrases too. I look at the homework, look at the most common mistakes, make video phrases and get them again to analyze it. For example, here, I love the local traditional dances because it brings back memories. You can see the capitals are the stress. And I get students to analyze that themselves.
When I think the sign culture.
Okay, so they're struggling, but when they start to read it again and again, they start to understand the gap between how they would read it and how it's supposed to be pronounced. And it definitely narrows the gap between what pronunciation they have and what's needed. So that's how I do shadowing anyway. And then I do the videos of it as well, as you can see here.
So as usual, so shy and humble.
And you see the students struggling.
When meeting people in remote villages, I find them so shy and humble.
So they're trying to struggle, but they're starting to understand the appreciation of that rhythm. And then I work on intonation. And then after that, I just get into focus on my website. This has got lots of resources to help them on it as such. But it's also the macro, which is basically looking at longer dialogues, working on naturally producing the rhythms and the lexical items. They try to mimic sound, so subconsciously they're able to copy it without thinking too much about decoding the grammar and the lexical items. And from that, they sub-vocalize the pronunciation patterns so they can apply it to their own level of conversation. And through this, it also improves comprehension and fluency as well as pronunciation. So if you look here, the top left is basically the homework. I read it and I write down my version below it with suggestions, and I give this for students to do themselves in the class.
The first place, the watch people who don't know.
And so from that, they got a basic idea. Then I did a shadow of longer text.
As I have a long vacation, I would like to strengthen my language skills so that I can speak to.
So again, they're shadowing that, but again, it's related to what they have spoken about, and you've got color coding so they can see the sentences like topic sentences, supporting sentences, and even counter arguments as well. So it helps them with their learning. So I use a range of both those micro and macro levels, and then later on, I can work on the fun things such as connected speeches. And for example, how we place and the manner we speak, such as a place of certain items. But again, I haven't got enough time to talk about it, so I'm going to move ahead. Okay, but you can see, like, for example, here, big opportunity, how to join it, woke up. So you can see how the sort of like becomes more relaxed together. But all these resources on the website. What I want to do today is try to explain to you my actual research, okay? Let's move on now. The research is really important, but again, I found that it's uncomfortable for students to progress, and it does take a lot of chipping away for them to improve, but you have to keep encouraging to work at it. Okay, but if I get to the research question, I had two questions. One is about fluency. How did they speak regarding speed, breakdown, and repairs, and also the pronunciation? How did that improve in regards to pitch, intensity, duration, and also overall rhythm? So the participants I taught and evaluated were 11 students. Okay, they're first-year students at the University in Tokyo, and they're of a high beginner intermediate level, and they're generally motivating what they're saying. And I contrasted this with a control group of 17 students who I didn't teach, who had just regular classes, but of the same level at the beginning anyway. So how did I get the data? Well, I looked at fluency and pronunciation. Fluency, I took 12 recordings and then put them into 4 quarters because I wanted to add a mean so I could evaluate with the control group. The actual evaluation was getting to have a 1-minute spontaneous monologue conversation about what they did the weekend, and this happened week in, week out. And then I evaluated them on this speech rate, articulation rate, mean length of run, and phonatial time rate, which basically means speech rate, how many syllables per minute, articulation rate, how many syllables per minute, except any pauses for 3 seconds, length of run, basically how long they could speak a sentence, how many syllables per sentence, and phonatial rates is how much they spoke compared to how much they paused. And then pausing, again, I looked at the pause rate, the pausing between clauses and in clauses. So if there's pausing in the clauses themselves, then it is more like disfluency. But if they speak more like this, then it's pausing between clauses, and that's what we want. Then pronunciation, 6 tests, not as many to memorize what's going on, but we looked at the function and content words, looking at the pitch, duration, and intensity. Okay, if you look left side, that's looking at the contents word. The middle is to look at the function words, and the right is the rhythm between the function and the content words as such. So if you look at fluency, rushing quickly, basically you can see that the control group performed less well than the research group, who always improved. Articulation rate, the same kind of thing, improvement there. Phonatical rate, surprisingly, again, research group improved all the way through. And then length of run, once more, great. Once more, the research group improved on all those aspects. So as regards speed, definitely performed well. Pause rate, definitely pausing less. You can see that's the control group, and you can see that over the year is the research group. But if you remember, I looked at the pausing in the actual clauses. This is a problem for the less for the research group. Control group definitely paused more, but there was overall improvement in as regards fluency. Length, again, this flattened off as such, but there was slight improvement by both groups. On the clausal, this surprised me in the fact that there was a reduction in pauses between the phrases when it didn't need to be, but it just shows you again how much confidence they're getting. And the lengths, again, kind of flattened out. Frequency repair, you can see that this was varied as such. The only thing I want to mention about this is, if I look at the research group, there's an improvement in the amount of field pauses. But interestingly, what I was keen to note was that there was an increase in self-correction when they're trying to maintain, which just shows how much they're struggling to maintain the conversation. The second part was looking at fluent pronunciation. Let's go on that part. Pronunciation was to look at the pitch, where there was not much improvement overall. If you look at duration, there was only improvement in 1. Okay, the improvement was basically in the duration of function words, and so they reduced the length of those function words, which was actually quite useful. Intensity, not much changes there either. Okay, so what do we learn from this? Well, function words were the only ones we could change as regards duration. Everything else couldn't change, and it just shows you how challenging it was. Okay, but there was improvement over a short period of time, so happy about that. But yes, due to processing, it became very challenging for the students to produce native level pronunciation. The conclusion, time per practice really worked well. Students were definitely engaged. There was improvement in fluency. Pronunciation takes more time, but focusing on resensitized students to pronounce better was important by focusing on their motor skills as such. Okay, I would like to show you examples, but there's not much time to show you, I'm afraid. I can just show you one big example. This is from the beginning.
Ingredients with my mother. Then I cooked.
So you can see there's a slight improvement from that one That's during the midweek, and this
IT
is what?
restaurant. Yeah, to study. But
So let's kind of pause in as such. But all I say is this is a very useful tool to have in your class as such. The website's free if you want to use it to get students to work on fluency or the pronunciation as well. And these are my references. Sorry about that. I had to rush through very fast to get to the end, but that's my name, Jason Pipe, and there's my email if you'd like to contact me. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's have a round of applause for our presenter. Thank you, Jason. So you can use the icon or you can unmute yourself and applaud.
Thank you.
Yeah, personally, that was very useful for me.
Contact me. I can give you lots of tips. It is a struggle with fluency. It is a struggle with pronunciation, but because they're high school students, grammar, vocabulary they know, but not know how to apply it. So it really does assist a lot. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there's 4 minutes between now and the next session. So you're free to leave the Zoom room and go to the next session that you wish to attend. I will stop recording now.